In April 2012, the National Cowboy Museum unveiled a unique and much anticipated gallery exhibit. A tribute to the Hawaiian Paniolo Cowboy is now proudly on display in Oklahoma City. The Hawaiian Islands, famous for beautiful beaches and waving palm trees, are also home to King Kamehameha's cowboys, Paniolos, descendants of a Spanish California-Hawaiian cultural exchange in the 1830s. The first beef cattle to arrive on the Hawaiian Islands were a gift from a British sea captain in 1793 to King Kamehameha. He kept them as protected wildlife for his sole pleasure. This 5 head of California stock, Ganado Black and Rio Tinto Reds, thrived in the lush tropical vegetation. After a couple of decades, the 1,000-pound guests began to tear up the island crops and some of its residents. So in 1815, the king lifted the prohibition on killing his pets and sought help managing iron-eared cows. European settlers had limited success capturing the worst bovine offenders by using pits and other traps. So in 1832, King Kamehameha enticed California vaqueros serving on whaling and merchant ships to help with the wild bullock problem. These colorful vaqueros established livelihoods beef catching on horseback. They taught the island men the Spanish method of ranching as practiced by the mission herders of California. These cultural emissaries from America's west coast were known as Paniolos, from the Spanish word español. The Californians also shared their knowledge of horsemanship and the equestrian equipment required to work cattle.
Welcome back to the National Cowboy Museum. We're here in one of our galleries, the American Cowboy Gallery. We've got a special guest today, all the way from the Hawaiian Islands. Dr. William Bergin was a veterinarian at the Parker Ranch for over 25 years. A legendary Parker Ranch on the Big Island. And now he is an associate board member of the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum and a very great friend of this institution. Welcome, Billy.
Thank you.
Billy, you've told me you were not a Paniolo, you're not a cowboy per se, you're a veterinarian, but were you raised on a ranch in Hawaii?
I was born out in the country on a sugar plantation, all of whom had adjacent ranches. And Parker Ranch is one of them that was fairly close by, along with other ranches.
A few years ago, I think you helped organize the Paniolo Preservation Society. That's not your typical historical society, is it?
The Paniolo Preservation Society was an inspiration of myself and about 19 other people spread throughout the islands that were really backgrounded in ranch life and cowboy life that saw a real need to preserve some of the wonderful aspects of that heritage. Our governor at the time was Governor Cayetano, and in 1998 he declared it the year of the Paniolo. And we felt that if the governor was observant enough to see a need for that, we better get busy and make sure we do preserve that wonderful heritage.
You've written at least 3 publications on Hawaiian ranches and the Parker Ranch. What was your goal for these publications?
I set out in 1996 to take a few months and write a book about the history of Parker Ranch. And before you know it, it was a 2-volume endeavor, which grew to be a 3-volume endeavor. And all 3 of those on the history of Parker Ranch have been out, and they're all entitled Loyal to the Land. My 4th and final volume will be out in about 2015. And the nature of that title, Loyal to the Land, grows out of the fact that there's something about that outfit that if you've been with them, if you're born on that ranch or raised on it or worked for them, and no matter how you left the ranch, you never stop loving the ranch for its countryside, its hills, and its rainfall and sleeting rain sometime and muddy weather, but the beautiful hills and trees and everything, the great horses, the cattle, and most of all, the wonderful people. You remain loyal to that outfit no matter what. Loyal to the land.
When introducing visitors here at the museum to Hawaiian cowboys, they're always fascinated. But how are cowboys on the islands different from cowboys on the mainland?
Well, for one thing, we're insular. there's really no place to go with your calves but to sell them and have them leave the state, especially in modern ranching in the islands. In terms of lifestyle, Hawaii certainly is unique in that in a given day a cowboy might be as much as a fisherman as he is a hunter, as he is a cowboy. So in a given day he could work at 5,000 or 6,000 feet of elevation and in the evening go down and fish off the shoreline in the same given day. And again, that applies to their work. A lot of their work was coastal, like swimming the cattle into the ocean. But in the same token, not too many continental American cowboys get to surf and rope in the mountains on the same given day. So it is unique in that way. And Hawaiian cowboys usually are as fond of the ocean as they are the mountain. Many of them are great fishermen, as well as hunters and ropers. But it's a wonderful opportunity to share both pastimes in a given day.
Your observations on the Spanish heritage that is still visible in, in their working methods and in their equipment of the saddle.
That speaks to the origin of the term Paniolo, where the people of Hawaii, the ancient people that recognize that the Spanish influence, the Mexican that came there, would be described as Espanol, and not having all those letters in Hawaiian, of which there's only 12 letters, it was reduced to Paniolo. Things Paniolo meant cowboy. It didn't necessarily mean that you were ethnically Spanish or Mexican. You could be a Japanese cowboy or Chinese cowboy, but you're still Paniolo. So it's a heritage that was centered around your profession and not necessarily your genetic makeup. And for some reason or another, even through today, the Hawaiian cowboy saddle is very much a Mexican hybrid. It's not quite a Western stock saddle. It's not quite a roper. But for over 150 years, the prototype never changed as it is today. Hawaiians went ahead and modified the bulky horn and squatty nature of the Mexican saddle that the vaqueros brought to the islands in 1833 and refined it and made it a prettier, a lighter product that is still in service today. And I think that's a remarkable fact that it really didn't have to morph into anything any better than what the Hawaiian people already did with it.
Billy, isn't there an interesting rodeo heritage on the Hawaiian Islands?
Rodeo in the islands would have a time frame that started just before the turn of the century. So in the late 1800s, there would be match ropings, steer ropings, of course. There would be calf or team ropings, and to a degree some bronc riding that would, of course, have been saddle bronc. But as we moved into the 1900s, very, very early, there was recognition that our steer ropers were able to be matched here on the mainland. And a businessman named Evan Lowe sponsored an opportunity for 3 of cowboys, in fact happened to be from Parker Ranch, to go ahead and take a steamship to the West Coast and a train to Cheyenne. And in 1908, they came home, never to return to Cheyenne, having won the 1st, 3rd, and 6th places in the steer roping. So it certainly wasn't a fluke that they scored so well on strange horses, but good horses. And the Cheyenne and Wyoming were great hosts to those Hawaiian people.
Are these Hawaiian Paniolos that you love so much, are they a thing of the past?
Well, I don't think it ever will be, and I think what's saving a tremendous amount of that heritage is rodeo. Youth rodeo is very big in the islands, and especially team roping is big across the board. And even though the apparel, in other words, a ball cap instead of a hat, and a four-wheeler, an ATV instead of a horse, has made changes, they'll never be without horses completely. And in terms of the heart of many of those men and women, it is back to horses. And I think that heritage will never be lost. What's helping preserve it probably as much as anything is the birth of a repository like Paniolo Preservation Society. And that was paralleled by a tremendous burst in youth rodeo. Very unfortunately, we probably have more wild cattle than we've ever had in my lifetime. And that the use of horseback apprehension of wild cattle is still having to be done, probably as much or more than ever before.
Why would there be more wild cattle now?
There are 5 mountain ranges. When I was a boy, there were only 2 that were affected by overpopulation of wild cattle. And that went back to the war years, where a lot of young men were taken to war, and the elders and the youth could really not keep up with the management of those cattle. Unfortunately, today, all islands, all of those mountain ranges are on the Big Island are covered with wild cattle. And a lot of that has to do with the tightening of the budget of many of these ranches, where fences could not be kept up, and cattle got into the forest reserve, which is very unfortunate also because of the environmental destruction that they play in those fields.
Well, it's to your credit and to Bill White, another board member with the National Cowboy Western Heritage Museum, that this project has come to pass for our visitors.
The first emotion in seeing this display is one of tremendous gratitude, because we have wanted for a long time to have some sense of place in this institution here in Oklahoma, because we look at it as being really the premium focal point of the preservation of history of the American West and of ranching. And to that degree, of course, I think the institution, as well as we from Hawaii, are going to be very gratified by the number of people that come through here and get to witness visually that transition from the vaquero to the Paniolo to the American cowboy. And the way it's been presented, it flows so naturally.
Once again, thank you for stopping during this busy weekend with all the Board of Directors meetings to look in and help us open this new exhibit here at the museum.
Thank you, Don, and thanks for your special interest in this project.
This podcast is a companion to the museum's membership publication, Persimmon Hill Magazine. It's a great resource for keeping in touch with our Western heritage. Visit nationalcowboymuseum.org for details. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.